Hello guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is Courtney King, and today's short talk is going to be the second video in my 4-part series about the pros and cons of working for a American tech company versus a European tech company. Today, we are talking about the cons of working for a company in EMEA. Let's get started. Okay, so the first item I wanted to talk about is work-life balance, but specific elements of work-life balance and time off. If you haven't seen my previous video, go ahead and watch it now, but I spoke about this as my first item on that list as well, and it is more of a nuanced subject than people think. Many people think that Americans have worse work-life balance and Europeans have much better work-life balance, and maybe at a population level that's true, but when you're talking about tech companies, there's more nuance than that. So I would say that I was kind of surprised that my European coworkers, number one, have amazing maternity leave, which is something that we desperately lack here in the United States, but that the parental leave was split and in a gendered way. So when you work for an American tech company, almost all American tech companies offer parental leave, and that leave can be used for anyone of any gender. Doesn't matter, and it's the same amount of time. That's not how it works in Europe. Number one, the EU has all sorts of regulations. It varies country by country, etc. And it is gendered. The person that's having the child typically gets very, very generous maternity leave is what they call it. And then the person that is not having the child gets way less time than that. Still a little bit of time off, but not nearly as generous. So for instance, I worked for a company where the person having the child got 4 months of maternity leave, and actually the government would cover even longer if they wanted to stay out longer. But the person not having the child only got 5 weeks. Now that was surprising to me, again, just because the policy is not typically gendered when you're working in North America. If you are lucky enough to be offered parental leave in North America, it's typically just the same no matter if you're having the child or not. Some people may think that's fair, some people may not think that's fair. But then I worked with some other companies where my European counterparts, especially the dads, got very little time, sometimes a few days. And they were sort of surprised that dads in the United States got the same amount of time as moms would. If we're just talking about an American tech company that's offering parental leave, it would just be the same amount of time, 3 months, 4 months, whatever it is. That definitely surprised me. The other thing is that a lot of times in European countries, most of the population will take vacation at the same time. So August, for instance, most people will take off work. Most companies are really quiet. A lot of businesses completely shut down because that's just the month where most people in the country take vacation. And the rest of the year, they'll take very little vacation. So when you think about it from an American point of view, you're like, whoa, they take an entire month off in the summer. And that's true, right? Like 4 weeks off is amazing. But if you're coming from an American tech company that offers very generous PTO, as a lot of American tech companies do, offers unlimited PTO, you'll take PTO here and there. Me in particular, I like to take small amounts of PTO. I like to tack them on to, let's say, extended weekends, long weekends, federal holidays. So if I'm given a 3-day weekend, I'll tack a couple PTO days on there and make it a 5-day weekend for myself. I like to do things like that so that they're sort of split evenly throughout the year. Doesn't so much work like that with my European coworkers. There seemed to be like a culturally agreed on like time of the year, maybe Christmas. There are a lot of companies and countries that would prioritize Christmas, and people would take 5 to 6 weeks off during Christmas, but it was kind of like weird if you wanted to randomly take time off in April, right? People were not as open to that. It's not that your PTO would get denied, but it was kind of like this attitude of like, well, everybody else is working, but I guess you're going to be off work in April. It's that sort of thing, which was really weird. Again, it doesn't mean that work-life balance is bad, obviously. It just means that they think about it a little differently than we do here in the States. So the next con of working for a European company that I found, and I'll try and say this in a way that isn't too harsh, I found that a lot of the upper management decision-making was just a little immature. There were just some big decisions that would happen, some big strategic planning mistakes that would happen that Us independent contributors could kind of clearly see that this wasn't the best idea, especially those of us from the United States. Just poor decision making, especially as it applies to customer service. The way that Europeans think about customer service is completely different from the way that Americans think about it. That will come as a surprise to no one. And I would say it's generally less important, especially if you're serving enterprise level companies. All that means is very large companies as opposed to very small companies. If you have lots of enterprise clients, you got to bend over backwards, essentially, to keep them happy, at least at North American companies. That's just a level of customer service that people here are used to. And they're really not going to put up with anything less. Even if the product is great, that's not enough. You as a company and your customer service, customer success, whatever teams have to provide really high level service to them in order to keep them as customers, or you're going to be in trouble come renewal time. That was definitely not the same when I worked for European companies. There was definitely less of a preference and a weight put on customer service by my management, and a lot of their decisions reflected that. So if you're from North America and you're watching these decisions play out and you're thinking to yourself, these are going to result in a worse customer experience. Why are we doing this? The reason is generally because customer experience is not as important to leadership in a lot of European companies. Now, with a lot of this stuff, pretty much all of this stuff, guys, I'm generalizing. So, of course, there's going to be tons of exceptions. You probably know of an exception. You might be saying to yourself, that's not true. I work for a European company. Our customer service is great. Fair enough. And there's American companies with terrible customer service. But that sort of decision-making for me felt very immature, because in North America, you would lose enterprise clients if you made decisions that made their everyday experience worse. But that was something that I witnessed all the time working for European tech companies. It was very surprising to me. Okay, the next item I wanted to talk about, this one is pretty funny, and not something that you might immediately think of. This more has to do with interacting with European coworkers and sometimes customers. Let's see if I can say this. So Europeans will be a little bit arrogant, and they'll make a lot of comments that have the assumption that everything is worse in America. So they make a lot of comments about how lucky you must feel to work for a European company, and like, thank God we've given you benefits because we know you poor Americans just don't have anything to show for yourselves, and you're all just, getting shot on the way to buy a $200,000 Big Mac at McDonald's, and your car's about to be repossessed because you didn't pay your student loans. Like, I'm exaggerating, but you'll get a lot of these sort of, I don't actually think they're intentionally snarky, but they come off as snarky comments about like, thank goodness you've been saved by us, a wonderful European company. That was pretty goofy. It's not a big deal. You kind of just correct people. I was never like really offended by it, but there's some people out there who might be. Okay, the next item on my list, I'm afraid that these things are going to get me in trouble, but the next item on my list is generally worse technology. What do I mean? So when you work for any tech company, you get signed up and they give you an account with all of the pieces of software that you're going to use day to day. This is true for many jobs. So your email, your this, blah, blah, blah. A lot of those things are the same cross-continentally. Zoom, right? Google, Gmail. There's a lot of things that are just the same. However, there's maybe secondary pieces of software, scheduling pieces of software to handle payroll, software to handle your benefits, things like that you have to use on at least a weekly basis as well. And sometimes they are American tech companies and sometimes they're European tech companies. And the pieces of software that were European tech just generally worked worse. This was something that even Europeans would admit, that their tech just seems to be a little bit behind. And again, there's, like I was just saying, less of an importance placed on customer experience. And so oftentimes the customer experience isn't that great. Yeah, maybe it functions basically, but it's clunky, difficult to use, has a lot of outages, lots of outages I feel like I experienced with pieces of European tech. Again, there are lots and lots of exceptions to this, but generally I found European tech to be more buggy and less able to integrate with other pieces of technology than I did American tech. There's a lot of issues with, Silicon Valley and American tech, but the quality of the products at large is pretty good. And you feel that when you start to use maybe more global software. Okay, guys, before we get to the last item, do me a favor, like, subscribe, hit the bell icon. It costs you nothing, right? So help me out. What it does is it lets the algorithm know that you're enjoying this video and it puts my content in front of more people. So if you could do that for me really quick, that would be amazing. I really appreciate it. All right, so the last item on this list is a really important one and actually has the power to change your day-to-day quite a bit. So hear me out. So I found my European leadership, but also my European customers to be generally more risk averse, more suspicious of technology, and more anxious about both risk-taking and finances. Now, this can affect your day-to-day in many ways. I've talked in a lot of my videos about how anxiety from the top of a corporate pyramid sort of filters down to you at the bottom of the corporate pyramid as an independent contributor. It starts with your CEO being really anxious about things, and he puts pressure on his managers, and the managers put pressure on you, essentially, is how it works. I find there's a lot of that. There's a high amount of that when I worked for European companies. Generally more risk-averse attitude. I would say that American tech is known for being very risk-taking, right? Move fast, break things, take the risk, do the thing. Who cares if you fail? Like that's basically the whole impetus behind Silicon Valley and American tech. There's definitely a more fiscally conservative, more strategically conservative vibe to working with European tech companies. And I found my European customers to be, I would say, less tech savvy and just generally more suspicious of technology. In many ways, working for a European tech company feels like you've gone back in time 10 years. And where American tech was 10 years ago, that's kind of where European tech is today. And so if you think about it that way, that can sort of help frame the context that you're going to be working in. This isn't always a problem, but again, if you have a leadership team that is both risk averse and really anxious about finances, even when they don't need to be, that can lead to some kind of hasty decisions to cut back or cut product features that would be really good for customers, et cetera, things like that. All of these cons sort of tie into one another. But yes, this can definitely affect your day-to-day. Dealing with European customers, I didn't have to deal with a lot of them. I was hired in North America to handle North American customers. But when I did, yeah, I would say that they were generally a bit more difficult about the whole situation, harder to please, less satisfied, and just less happy about technology. I don't know another way to say it. Less enthusiastic about technology. It sort of felt like pulling teeth to get them to just do a simple thing and not complain about it. So that's kind of ambiguous. I hope that was clear, but to me, that's the number one con of working with a European company is just sort of this adverse relationship with risk-taking and anxiety about finances. Okay, guys, that's it for me. Thank you for watching. If you have any experience working with a company like this, let me know. Leave me a comment. I'd like to hear your thoughts. Other than that, I'll see you in the next one.